So Hornby's newest model is the LNER P2 class. Came out only a few weeks ago, and I had mine on order for about 2 years. It's a locomotive I've wanted since about the 1990s, and I've been tempted to look at buying a kit to make it, but I knew that I would never be skillful enough to really do it justice. So I thought I'd do a comparison between the streamlined P2 that I got recently, Lord President, and the Cock of the North, the original model that Hornby produced in the railroad range back in about 2014, I think it was. Now, I pre-ordered both of these at the time because I've always been a fan of the P2. And I got Cock of the North, I think it was from Hatton's, for £70. Okay, that was 2014. Fast forward 9 years, what's £70 now? Maybe nearly double that. I think Hornby are asking about £130, £120 for Cock of the North now. You might find it a bit cheaper at some retailers, but obviously the railroad models have gone up with inflation. Lord President, on the other hand, cost me, I think it was about £210. I ordered it as soon as it was announced, and in fact, by pre-ordering, I've saved quite a bit of money on the price it is now in the shops, but Hornby honoured their original price. So, what's the difference? Well, obviously the more recent model is in the full railways range. It is very detailed. It's got all the lining on it. It's got lots of separately fitted parts, lots of very detailed, finely detailed handrails, and so on and so forth. It looks fantastic. In contrast, the P2 made in 2014, the railroad version, is very basic. It has some separately fitted handrails along the boiler, but it was in the design clever era that Hornby went through, and the tender is very basic. In fact, I'll get the super detailed version out of the way so you can have a closer look at the P2, the railroad version, in a minute. But there we go, just side by side. Now, a few things I noticed straight away is that the colour on the more recent model is richer. The lining stands out a bit more, and the lining is definitely more subtle. It's white, black, white lines, whereas the railroad version is just white lines, I think, on the boiler bands. And around the tender, it's just two white lines with nothing in between, whereas in the super detailed version, it's two white lines with black in between. Everything has got a little bit more finesse about the more recent model. There are one or two things about the more recent model that I think, though, were a bit unnecessary. I'm glad that it has, for example, metal buffers. That's gone a bit dark, hasn't it? I can't seem to get more light in there. I'll scroll back again. It has metal buffers, whereas my original Cock of the North had plastic buffers that are a bit rubbish. But to be honest, I'm not that fussed about the sprung nature of the buffers. I've always thought, for example, one of them has got a good spring, the other one, yeah, it's not it's sticking occasionally. Yeah, sprung buffers. Well, unless you're using screw link and 3-link couplings, there's no real point in having sprung buffers, because if you've got tension lock couplings, the buffers never actually touch each other. So no benefit of having sprung buffers, in my opinion. I've added the detailing parts, such as the drain cocks under the cylinders, and yeah, they don't stop it going round third radius curves incidentally, so you can add those fairly well. Neither of my models runs particularly well on second radius curves, but the railroad version is slightly better. So I'm going to run them both in the same direction around second and third radius curves. But Lord President on the second radius curves, it made a scraping sound. It obviously doesn't like them, and it's not surprising when you've got such a long wheelbase locomotive, 8 coupled wheels. And I think it's really at the limits of what you can do with train set type curves and a fine detailed locomotive with relatively fine wheel flanges. If you want a locomotive to go around tighter curves, you really need to have rather a cruder mechanism like Juef produced many years ago with a an 8-coupled express locomotive. I think it was the 241P class, and that might even have been a 482, yeah, by British standards. That could go around second radius curves easily, but it had much cruder wheels with much bigger flanges and a lot more slop in them, whereas Lord President's a bit more precise. Anyway, I shall just show you Lord President setting off, and you can see it's relatively smooth, and it's hauling an 8-coach train of Ian Kirk kit-built coaches. Reasonably smooth start there. I'll let it get out of the way, and then we'll have a bit of a look at Cock of the North. So I'll just pause the other train there, and there is the railroad version. Move in slightly. To be honest, from a 3-foot, the 3-foot rule as we sometimes call it, from 3 foot away, can you really tell the lack of detail? I don't think you can. There's some things you notice, for example, the driving wheels aren't lined in the beautiful way that the Lord President is. But at the time it came out, for £70, I thought it was fantastic value. It was the biggest locomotive in my fleet and one of the cheapest, well, certainly one of the cheapest I'd bought new. In fact, to this day, I think it's possibly the cheapest locomotive I bought brand new. And I don't buy that many brand new, but £70 was great value. Anyway, there was one fault, and a lot of people have criticised Cock of the North for this, and that was it had a typical 3-pole budget railroad motor in it. It did have a flywheel attached, but the big problem with the 3-pole motors is they were quite jerky to set off. Once going, it ran beautifully smoothly, but I could never get a really smooth start with it. So I looked on YouTube and saw people had replaced the 3-pole motor with a 5-pole version, and this has made it a beautifully smooth runner. Now mine is also DCC fitted with a TTS sound chip. I've turned off the sound at the moment just so it's nice and quiet, but I'll show you how it can set off pretty smoothly. Now, some people have said that the new P2 doesn't pull as well as the railroad version, and it's slightly lighter. But to be honest, this is managing 8 kit-built coaches around third radius curves. Okay, I'm using a feedback controller, but that doesn't seem to be a problem. It seems to run very smoothly to me, and it doesn't slip, it doesn't hesitate. So I think the pulling power of the recent version is more than adequate. And the railroad version, yes, that was fantastic, but as I say, no problems with the newer version. And I suppose if you're trying to pull 10 or 12 coaches, but you've got train set curves on your layout, then maybe you're just being a bit optimistic. And I don't think you can criticise a company like Hornby for producing a model that can't manage that, because to be honest, if your layout is so small that you've got, I say so small, I don't mean that in a disparaging way, but if your layout is small so that you've had to use second and third radius curves, nothing wrong with that, then perhaps it's a bit unrealistic to be running, you know, a 12 coach train on it. If I had a great big layout, mine's about, I suppose the main part of it is about 15 foot long. If it was 25 foot long, maybe I would try and run 10, 12 coach trains. But to be honest, I don't normally run more than 6 coaches. It's just that I've got a nice rake of Ian Kirk teaks and I'm running them all together. So a nice smooth stop as well. No complaints at all with the running of Lord President. So my conclusion is that the new model is brilliant. It's really what I wanted and what I've been looking forward to for years. But the old railroad model is nothing to be disappointed by. It really is a very good value for money model. And I say, if you take out the 3-pole motor and replace it with a 5-pole motor, the older model can run superbly. I would say it runs as well as the newer model if you replace the motor. But the new model, can't fault it. It's got a 5-pole motor with a flywheel, I believe. And everything about it just looks fantastic. It says on the box, my only reservation I suppose, it says on the box minimum radius 400 and whatever millimeters is second radius basically. I would say third radius minimum really. Second radius it'll slow down a bit. With my model you get a bit of a scraping sound. I don't like the sound of that. So yeah, if you want a big model like this, you're best off having a minimum of third radius curves. But if that's what you've got, and with a feedback controller, it tends not to slow down so much on the curves, and it really is a super model. And as I say, mine manages 8 coaches quite easily. If you want more coaches than that, then choose more sweeping curves and you'll be fine. Okay, well I hope you've enjoyed this quick look at the old and new P2 models from Hornby, and see you again soon. Bye for now.